Hey friends and digital marketers, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less when you manage projects on Wix Studio. You can work in sync with your team on one canvas. You can reuse templates, widgets, and sections across sites. You can create a client kit for seamless handovers and leverage best-in-class SEO defaults across all your Wix sites. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio to see more. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Angie Jones. She's a VP of Developer Relations at TBD Block, building open source toolkits to enable frictionless cross-border payments. How are you?
I'm great, Scott. How you doing?
I'm a little jet lagged because you and I are both in Berlin, which is crazy. I don't often do Hansel Minutes on the road, but I saw you yesterday at the event, and I jumped at the chance to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, we had an interesting chat at dinner yesterday at this little get together that they have for speakers at this event that we're at called We Are Developers. And we were talking about kind of the state of developer relations. And I wonder, do you think that the concept of DevRel is an understood job, or do you think that regular people in the streets know what it is that we do?
Oh, actually, no, I don't think the masses understand. And I would even argue, Scott, that maybe I shouldn't even say this, but some people in DevRel probably don't really understand the job.
Is it marketing? I've had people say, oh, well, you're just marketing. Someone I have a TikTok, and it's my own TikTok. It's not for work. And someone said that I was a PR manager. I had never heard that before. I'm a public relations manager. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just on TikTok, but okay, that's cool.
Right. I don't think it's marketing. I think it's maybe some form of it, if we're being honest. But I actually wrote something about this a couple of years ago. We all know that developers are pretty allergic to traditional marketing techniques, right? We just kind of run away from marketers and salespeople. And so DevRel, I feel like, is a way to kind of bridge that gap where maybe you want developers to be aware of your tool or your product, but not in I'm trying to sell you this, right? Hey, fellow techie, Scott, you always show me new cool tools and stuff. Every time I see you, I'm downloading a new app or something like that. So it kind of feels like that. You're a trusted source to me. I know you wouldn't steer me in the wrong direction, and whatever you're showing me actually provides value to me. So I look at DevRel sort of like that.
Yeah. I don't know if this is only a West Coast thing, but there's this guy on the radio, the actual AM, FM radio, who we always grew up listening to, who was an advertisement, and he had a diamond shop. And at the end of his diamond commercial, he would say, "You've got a friend in the diamond business." And everyone would be talking about that when they would get married or whatever. They're oh yeah, I'm going to call my buddy. I've got a friend in the diamond business. And that kind of got into my head because I've always tried to, whether it's be working at Microsoft or other places, to be the community's friend that works at in this case, Microsoft, where I work right now,
Yeah, that's exactly right. I wouldn't recommend this to you if it's not of some use to you, right? I feel like I work for the community over any company. And I've been in situations where I've even recommended competing tools, right? Because that was the best tool for the person I was talking to at that time. And I want you to be successful, whether that's with the company I'm working for or not,
Yeah, but that's a challenge though, right? Because right now it's a very difficult job market, I think it's fair to say. And we're seeing some people in DevRel that are moving or some squishing of their jobs, and they're being pinched out. And then they'll go on Twitter and say, the company doesn't care about you. And we're seeing like think pieces about the death of DevRel. And there's also some people who are saying that maybe it's not a valuable job and the companies don't themselves understand it. So like, how do you have a job if you need a job and you have to care about the product, right? You actually have to like the product. But then aren't you a salesperson at that point? And then that's where things get very blurry for me. I think I'm pretty good at saying like, no, I'm not going to talk about that. That's not a product that we sell that I'm excited about. I'm not excited about every Microsoft product. But that can maybe come from a place of privilege, because at some point, if I said to my boss, I don't want to talk about Project Foo, he'd be like, well, that's your job. You need to talk about Project Foo. And then what do you do?
Yeah. I think the best developer advocates are able to navigate this pretty well. So I've been in that same situation, right, where there's been products that I don't believe in, or I don't think they're well developed, or whatever the reason may be, but like I'm not about to push that on people because that's not genuine, right? And I'm very vocal about that. And that probably does come from a place of privilege where I can say, hey, this product sucks. Here are the reasons why. I'll try internally to improve that. But if I don't win that, I'm not pushing that on my fellow developers. I'm just not.
Yeah. That really resonates with me. I feel like bringing feedback back to the team is like so fundamental. Like, because people do research, they do like formal developer research, and they do user interface studies, and they do surveys. But then I'll go on a trip and I'll spend a week talking to people using the product, and they'll say, hey, yeah, but in the real world, when I do X, Y, Z, this is how it went down. I'll write that up and I'll bring it back, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea people were doing it like that. And then it starts up new research and new conversations. That's a really valuable aspect of being a developer relations person.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks miss that. It's not just about writing blog posts or giving demos. Like, I think it's super important. Probably one of the most important aspects of the job is to actually be out there in the community, a true member of the community where people trust you enough to even share how they really feel about it, or how they're using it, or their pain points and what they're struggling with, right? So you're not supposed to be talking at the community, right? You're supposed to be working with them and helping to enable them. And so with that is when you get like these moments where it's like, oh, this is how people are using it, or, oh, here's a pain point that, I've been hearing across the globe, like my last 3 stops, someone has brought this up, right? And I found like internally, people really appreciate that when you come back and you say, all right, I just came from, we're in Berlin right now, right? So I'm going to probably hear some stuff here. When I go back to the office, I need to share that internally, like, yo, these are the pain points. Here's what people are complaining about. Here's what people love. Here's where people were getting tripped up. Here's what they didn't understand. And usually when I do that, everybody's all ears. The engineering team, the marketing team, like everybody wants to hear that information. Is truly valuable. I was talking with someone last night, and she asked me a question about developer relations departments, and specifically at her company, they weren't respected, right? And I share with her how just what we're talking about, a lot of times people don't understand what you do. They see your photos, like you're always on the road, you're in the like line lounges, you're taking selfies with people. It looks like a party, right? And so if you don't understand the work that's being done, it's really easy to resent that team, like, why are they spending up the budget, like traveling the world, and we don't see any output from that? So you need to share these things and let them know what it is you're doing and how the community is receiving whatever it is that you're out talking about. And I think then people understand better internally, like the role of DevRel.
Yeah. I've always felt very strongly about the idea that business travel is not a junket. It's not a party from wheels down to wheels up. I'm here to work. And I actually kind of I do that to a fault. So I'll do user groups, customer meetings, multiple panels, multiple talks, and I'll like basically play Tetris with my calendar, filling up my days, because I'm honestly like paranoid that people will be like, hey, he flew to Berlin for like 4 days and he did one talk, you know, and they'll be like, what, and just walked around town. Like, what is that? Right. So, I mean, do you feel like that at all? Like, I don't want anyone at work to be like, I'm just hanging out. So I will, to a fault, hurt myself packing stuff tight.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I was supposed to come here to do like one thing. I'm now like on multiple panels. I'm doing a workshop. I'm going to like do some office hours at the booth. Like, you're filling time in, right? I don't want to just be sitting around, you know, and I'm also here to learn. I want to see what everybody else is talking about and, you know, what they're doing in different companies and things like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be all about partying or sightseeing or hanging out in the speaker's lounge, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let me move to a slightly spicy question, because we have sometimes questions happen, and I feel like is this something we should talk about publicly? But I think it's important for you and I as kind of senior people to talk about these things. So without giving away ages, I think it's fair to say that you're probably not 22.
Okay.
You've been doing, you've been doing this for a minute. You are a senior leader, right? You're global vice president at a company right now, and you're leading a team. How important is it that a DevRel person who's early in career, who might be 22, be a dev? What are the roles for the technical, the highly technical, and the maybe not so technical people when they enter this kind of job of developer advocacy? And do you ever recommend that they go off, become a dev, go be a dev for 5 or 10 years, and then come back when they're done?
Yeah. So I get in trouble sometimes when I answer this question, but I'll give my honest opinion. From my perspective, and I'll say that the places that I've worked, specifically in doing DevRel, have been developer tools, SDKs, APIs, things like that, very developer-centric things. So in my experience, yes, you absolutely need to have been a developer at some point to understand these things, understand not just the technology part, but the constraints that developers have, right? So I'm a Java champion. I'm always up to date on the latest version of Java. We're like in the Java 20s. By the time this podcast release, we'll probably be on another version, right? And a lot of people are stuck, like some at Java 8, a lot of people. Some at Java 11, right? And so it's really easy to be like, oh, look at all of these cool new features. You should upgrade. And when you start talking to real developers and you understand the constraints that come with that, you realize like, hey, it's not as easy as it seems. Like updating a bank system, for example, is something that you're going to need to get a lot of buy-in from internally to do, you know? And so those are the types of things that I mean, like that you need to understand and appreciate about software development, not just the technical piece, but all the other stuff that goes along with that. And if you don't understand that, it's really hard, I think, to relate to developers. Now, like I said, I've gotten in trouble for these points of views. I wouldn't say in trouble, but, you know, people have very loudly disagreed with that and say you don't need to be a developer. And I'm a curious person. So I start like kind of poking into that to say, like, why do they feel that way? And what I see is like there's other types of products that might not be a SDK or API or something like that, that still may be marketed to developers, like maybe a productivity tool or something like that, or maybe you don't need to have the technical background to do that. I don't know. I've never been in that situation before.
Yeah. I've always felt like the most important skill to have as a developer relations person is empathy. And for me, I'm defining empathy as putting yourself in their shoes. So if you're working for a big IT department, it's really helpful to have worked for a big IT department before, because then you can go, oh man, let me tell you, when I was working for Little Debbie Snack Cakes, their IT department, blah, 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 right? Like I remember, and being able to relate to people like that. So I'm a big fan of people starting their developer advocacy career, maybe 5, or even I was going to say 10, and then I backed up to 5. So I need to not have filters, Angie. Let me tell you, 10 years into your career, then you can come and say, hey, I've got a decade of knowing what I'm talking about. Let me go and talk about these tools. I personally don't recommend it to people that are coming directly out of school.
Yeah.
Unless they were working on open source, or the work that they were doing in school was like software engineering, because I also think of software engineering and computer science as being very separate degrees, and a theoretical computer science degree is challenging. Now that said, I do work with and have worked with people who are early in career and have never been a line developer. So I guess let's take that question and make it more pointed. Do you need to be a shipping code dev? Or can you just do work on the side and, do open source stuff like that?
That's a tough one. I think there's some lessons that come with the full software development life cycle and experiencing that, right? Like shipping things to production, or having to live with the code base and the horrors coming back to haunt you. Actually, like doing pull requests and code reviews and things like that. I think all of that plays into it. I'll say it's a superpower for sure if you have all of that. Can you do it without it? You've done open source development. Yeah, probably. But I think you're going to miss like a bit of that empathy piece that you talk about, because that's never been your reality,
Yeah. I think, though, that my goal, and I think people's goal, should never be to gatekeep. And that's why when you said, like, you get in trouble because then you're telling people who might be listening, well, wait a second, I can't do this thing I want to do. Why are you telling me I can't do a thing I want to do?
Right. Or that I got to go work 10 years before I get to do it.
Right. And then it's like, well, then here's 2 old people on a call that are like complaining about, like, why the young people can't do a thing. And that's kind of a problem, or can be.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can. I'm just saying, here's the easier path, right? Like, sure, you can do it. Will you be as effective? Well, you're missing some tools. You're missing some experience. You're missing some lessons. So your path is not going to be as easy as someone who has that experience behind them. But sure, you can do it. Yeah. Do it.
That's a really interesting. I like the way you phrased that, though. This is an easier path. That's a kind way to do it. And maybe even a couple of years might just be enough, right? Or maybe having conversations with developers and really understanding. Honestly, for me, it's a software developer lifecycle. Just knowing what a dev does in their day job is, I think, the most important thing.
I think so too. And that said, I mean, I do have more junior developer advocates on my team that don't have that experience, but I wouldn't hire someone like that as the sole developer advocate. I think that's unfair to them, So I have other senior and staff level developer advocates who are able to mentor the juniors. But again, they're doing fine, like they can do it, but they're still learning about software development in general as well.
Yeah. Now, you and I had talked about leading teams and having teams of developer advocates, and how there was a time, I think, when companies asked developer advocates to basically do everything. You have to be a video editor. You have to be a samples writer. You have to be a social media expert. You have to be basically a Swiss Army knife. But I have found lately, just really building on the thing that the person is good at and that where their passions lie. And, not everybody's going to be good at writing samples, or not everyone's going to be good at writing documentation, is a more sustainable way to do things. Do you agree?
I totally agree with that. Like I have multiple people on my team, and everybody is free to do whatever they want, right? As far as like how they want to go about whatever work they need to do. So they could say, okay, I'm going to choose to write a blog post, or I'm going to choose to do a video or whatever. And they have the freedom to try it all and explore it, right? And they naturally tend to pick a couple of the things that they feel more comfortable doing, or they think that they're better at. And they say, well, like I'm not great at video, or I'm not great at writing. So I'm not going to do that. I'll focus on this other area. And someone else on the team, fortunately, does love the things that the other person doesn't. And so it kind of balances out. Again, when you have like a one person show, that's a lot harder. And I definitely understand teams that might only have one person, and that's a different scenario, I think. What do you think?
Well, I think if you're running DevRel for a company that's a small company, like a 20-person company, oh my goodness, if you had to make blogs, videos, tutorials, speak at conferences, do meetups, do webinars, develop the content, workshops, hackathons, training sessions, and then work on documentation, like at that point, you're Jack and Jill of all trades, master of none, right? That's a lot. That's asking for a lot. But I think if you're an engineer at heart, maybe you're not writing production code, but you understand the landscape with a speciality. That's a word. And I think also if you like humans, right? I don't know. I find extroverts to thrive in this kind of work, but I also know a lot of really good introverted DevRel people that are more kind of online and build really great communities on things like Discord.
Right. You're right.
It feels like there's some conversations happening right now about shrinking DevRel and not flying people all over the world. It's not just eco-friendly, but it's also just not really efficient. Do you prefer talking to people and like being in Berlin like we are right now, or do you prefer doing YouTubes and doing virtual work? Because COVID changed DevRel as well.
It did. It really did. That's just what I was going to say when you brought that up, that we saw something with COVID, like that you could basically reach your audiences virtually, and you don't have to always, connect with them in real life. And so that could be an effective tool. I personally started doing more online, such as like podcast episodes or even virtual meetups. Like before COVID, a meetup was in person. I was in real life. You had to, like, if you were in that city, like we're in Berlin right now, I might look up who has meetups here and, hey, I'm coming and I can do a talk or whatever. But COVID, forced people to go online. And so now I'm able to do meetups in places that I may not have ever been to in real life. And so I feel like I'm able to reach more people. That said, there is something very special about just being in person and connecting that way as well. So I think there's benefits to both approaches. I'm glad that now I have the online stuff in my tool belt. I feel like it's another avenue.
Yeah, it definitely taught me how to build a home studio. It taught me how to think about audio, video, lighting, and stuff like that. Because I want to put on a show. Like I look at some aspects of developer advocacy as being showmanship, showpersonship, right? Like it's like a one-man show. I want to go and like see somebody do stand-up. Like I want some lighting and some stage effects.
Yeah.
I just don't want to sit on Zoom. I don't want to sit on Zoom and watch some dude with a cursor, and small font. I want it to be a show, and I enjoy that kind of stuff. Even if the show is just, 2 turntables and a microphone.
Yeah, you're right. And you do that in person, like your live talks are a show. So I would expect that same thing from you, Scott, if I'm tuning in on YouTube, Don't cheat me.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. But you're right, though. There is something to be said for really sitting down and talking to people. I got to figure out what the sustainable way of doing that. You did the Angie World Tour, though, which continues. Like, how do you not burn out? We also hear a lot about devs and DevRel people, particularly just burning out.
Yeah, I travel a ton. I would say probably 90 to 95% of my time is spent on the road, which is a lot, right? And every year I say, I'm going to scale back. But I mean, there's so many wonderful opportunities and people that I want to connect with and conferences that I haven't done before that I want to do. And so I end up in the same boat. But I am trying, Scott. One thing that I'm doing is spreading the wealth. And so sharing these opportunities with other people, whether, they're on my team or someone else in the community that I might know of, and trying to, make space for them as well. So I'm not doing it all.
Yeah. I think that is your choice, though. I mean, I would say of all the DevRel people I know, you travel the most, and I don't mean that. That's just a statement of fact. But I know that you like it, and you don't appear to be burning out. You're still having fun.
I'm still having fun. But yeah, I gotta figure something out. It's a lot. I'm not burning out, but I do like my home, and I like my husband, and I want to be there some more.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I count the weekends. I don't want to be away from the boys. I got a little bit of a reputation in the DevRel community as being the guy that doesn't stay for the entire conference.
Oh, wow.
Well, because here's the thing, though, right? Like, I'll come and I'll do maybe 2 or 3 days. I'll do multiple customer meetings. I'll do user group panel, a talk, a workshop, a keynote, and then I'll try to get out. And I'll try to come in on Tuesday, come back by Thursday night. And then people will be like, why don't you stay for the party? And it's for me, it's a very simple decision. It's like my 16-year-old has a football game, right?
Uh-huh.
Or, my 18-year-old has a college. For example, I came in a little late for Berlin because I was taking my 18-year-old to his college, move-in weekend. Like that stuff matters. And I can count the number of weekends that I've got left before these young men move out of my house.
Okay.
So I'm not going to stay for the after party, I guess. The after party doesn't feed my spirit as much as hanging out with my people do.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I think that's important, right? Like, what's important in life, in weighing all of that and making sound decisions. So I think you do a great job of being there for the community, but also making sure you're taking care of home.
Yeah, I think so. Last question I want to ask you, which I think is an interesting one. Now, sometimes people think that words don't matter, but I feel like in software engineering and object-oriented development, picking the right word matters. And I remember doing, old 1990s style object-oriented development where we would get a thesaurus out and a dictionary, and we would try to figure out what the name of this object is going to be. And I never liked the word evangelism. I hate that word, developer evangelist, because it feels like I'm knocking on your door trying to convert you to my religion without respecting yours. I really like the word advocacy, or being an advocate. I love that. I feel like that was the right word. I'm curious what you think about evangelism and why that word persisted for so long.
Yeah, my very first developer advocate role, the title that was listed before I accepted the role was a developer evangelist. And I don't know what it is about that word that rubs me the wrong way, but it just didn't seem to define what it was that I wanted to do. I associated with preachy, and basically trying to force a belief on someone or something like that. And that was the opposite of what I wanted to do. And so I negotiated that as part of my, hiring process. I was like, okay, I don't want my title to be that. Can we change that to developer advocate? And they were like, oh, yeah, sure. We don't care, I have no idea why that was the title for so long, but I don't see it much anymore.
Yeah, I think that was a good example of changing the narrative and finding a better word. I don't know who came up with the word developer advocate, but if I'm going to advocate for my community, my people, because they've got a friend in the diamond business, then I'm going to say, well, this part of Microsoft Azure you don't need, or maybe you use this non-Microsoft product. I've always been the guy who was not necessarily running the Microsoft phone, or, I have a PlayStation or whatever. And people are like, what? You don't have all the Microsoft stuff? And I was like, no, because I'm a fully formed individual with beliefs and things that are not my company. I was a person before Microsoft, and hopefully I'll continue to be a person after. So being all in on my, the products. And if the product doesn't work right, then I'm going to work with the group internally and help them make it better, so that I will be excited about it. But I'm not going to just be blindly stoked about
That's
the product
right.
because that's who, and then that gets back to the beginning of the conversation, finding that balance because they are giving me a paycheck though, you know?
Right.
I want to be able to trust what you say though, right? If you think a thing is
That's super
cool,
important. That's
yeah,
super important. And I've had to push back on that, like at jobs before, where it's like, no, I absolutely cannot. And let me tell you, if I do this now, I'm going to lose some trust and I'm going to be less effective going forward. And neither one of us want that, you know? And I've had to take those hard stands, but I don't regret them at all.
yeah. Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate your content, your speaking, your engagement. We love your team. And we know that if Angie says something is cool, then we're going to go and check it out and maybe think about whether that's the thing that we want for our team and for our products. So I just want you to know how much we appreciate you in the developer community.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for everything over my career. You've been a wonderful advocate for me, and I really appreciate you.
All right. We've been talking with Angie Jones. She's a Global Vice President of Developer Relations at TBD Block. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.